AI podcast listeners, we are thrilled today to have a six-time published author, an AI researcher. He's an engineer data scientist with 5+ years of experience with machine learning powered solutions. Ayush Yajnik, thank
Hello.
you for coming on today.
Hey, I just want to tell your listeners, I didn't pay you guys to say all of that. Right? That's all. That's all of that is true. Yeah.
No, you just spoke at the Louisville AI Week,
Yes.
and you were. I'm being modest about how brilliant you are. You've built DBT pipelines, optimized airflow,
Yeah.
JGs. You are really in the weeds
Yeah. Yeah.
with these models,
Thank you.
and so I would say, I'm not giving you enough credit,
Well,
Ayush.
okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's really kind of you. Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and right now what your focus is when it comes to AI or machine learning.
Right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. A quick context about me. My name is Ayush Yajnik, as you've mentioned. I'm a data scientist and an analytics engineer at AAA Life Insurance. And I'm also an independent researcher. And I spend most of my time on the unglamorous but really important question of how AI systems have been behaving when it actually comes to the real people on the other end. So particularly people who are stressed or trying to make any sort of consequential financial decision. Um, why I'm here and what I think about AI is pretty interesting because I've been spending a lot of time thinking about what people like to call building empathetic AI solutions, which apparently nowadays means writing a really nice prompt and hoping the model sounds polite. And I sort of think like in a different way, because to me, empathy isn't something you sprinkle at the prompt level. It's something you actually engineer into the solution into the system. And the more I work on this, the more it feels like we're all having this conversation just at a completely wrong altitude. Because when most people when they hear empathetic AI, they just picture a chatbot that says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that," in a very soothing voice, right? I think that's not empathy. That's just theatrics thrown at your face by AI. And in regulated industries where I've had the experience of working in, confusing these two things is sort of how you end up with systems that actually sound caring while doing things that actually hurt people sometimes. So yeah, I think I'm pretty much excited about speaking about all of this and actually unpacking what empathy really is and where AI systems are getting it wrong, and probably some of them are actually getting it right. So, what business leaders can listening to this can actually think on a Monday morning.
And with the amount of AI systems and tools that are out there available to business owners,
Mhm.
surely they're going to want to choose one that has these empathetic qualities. But how can business owners tell whether an AI actually has empathetic qualities? How could they measure and test this?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Because that's and probably the honest answer is that most AI agents, in my view, most AI business leaders, in my view, are actually measuring the wrong thing. And there's a really expensive recent example of that. Um, I'll try and open some of the stats that I gathered for this conversation as well, right? In Feb of 2024, and I'll also refrain myself in naming any company over here, right? In the examples that I cite. But in Feb of 2024, there's this financial services company, right, which governs on the principle of, buy now and pay later. And they announced that they are coming up with their own chatbot, which is powered by OpenAI. And according to them, they can this chatbot can actually handle 2.3 million customer conversations, and it actually did in its first month,
Wow.
according to this company. this chatbot can actually handle the work of 700 full-time agents. That's great, right? And I'm assuming with this, the resolution with this, the satisfaction was also on par with humans. And according to them, again, the resolution time also dropped from 11 minutes to just under 2 minutes. And they projected like $40 million in profit improvement for the year. You
Wow.
know, the headlines were everywhere. Their CEO went on every business podcast you can name. But fast forward to 18 months later, it's actually even worse. So it's actually they posted a $99 million loss in their first half of 2025, which is actually 4 times worse than what they were earning on the same month last year. And their CEO publicly admitted that, and I'm quoting them, we focused too much on efficiency and cost, and the result was lower quality, which is just not sustainable. So, I guess they're just rehiring humans again. But, here's the thing that most people don't really realize. The AI wasn't broken. It was hitting every metric they were actually measuring. In my opinion, the metrics that they were measuring were broken. So when someone asks me how to measure whether an AI agent is actually empathetic or not, I tell them, you need to throw out 4 metrics and replace them with the other 4. And you should be throwing out you should be throwing out things like conversation quality, response speed, customer satisfaction surveys done immediately after the interaction, and the automation rate. Seems like everybody's just chasing after automating everything these days. And what I think is that all of these 4 metrics that I just mentioned, these are just vanity metrics. They look great until they don't. So I say, take these 4 metrics, throw them into the garbage can, and replace them with user-reported empathy, which is measured a week or 2 later, because 7 to 14 days is actually a decent amount of time, because in this amount of time, the resolution has actually played into the customer's life, right? You want to have proper escalation accuracy, meaning how often did the AI actually hand off when it should have, and how often did it actually not hand off when it should have, right? You want harm-adjusted outcomes, things 6 months out. Did the customer that actually lodged a complaint churn out? Did they file a complaint again? Did the resolution actually serve them? Here's the point. I mean, I'm not saying being empathetic is producing a very warm language. It's the actions that matters, right? In that vulnerable situation, and just because of that, we also need safer resolution rate. What percent of interactions actually resolved without producing any downstream harm? I feel these are just very slower, harder, and much more expensive metrics. But they're also the ones that are actually telling the truth. So if I were to give you a pity version about this, satisfaction is like a vanity metrics, and escalation accuracy is like a safety metric, and this financial services company that I just mentioned probably learned it the hard way.
Listen, you said so many things that were just jam-packed with gold. One of them being, in the beginning, you just mentioned, empathy shouldn't be sprinkled in prompt engineering.
Yeah.
This needs to be, what I took away, deliberate conversations that you're having with your team to then be able to deliberately interweave empathy within the builds and processes. You made a great point about testing every 7 to 14 days around customer satisfaction and conversation quality. That's something that I haven't heard anybody talk about. So, when you think about conversation quality in your models, tell me a little bit more about what that looks like. What looks like a quality conversation, and then what's something that would signal to you, hey, this is not good. This is not where we need to be as far as setting the standards of truth and empathy.
Right. I think, there are like, so probably this question is the one that I want your listeners to take action on, because these are like sort of like practical tips to make sure that our AI agents are more empathetic in nature, right?
Right.
So I'm not giving and this might take a little bit of a longer time, right? And this is a playbook that usually I tend to follow, and
Okay.
it's not something that I have developed. It's all of the research is available and open source. So these are a few of the points that I usually jotted it down when I was going through all of the research and trying to implement some sort of empathetic principles in the developments and research that I've been doing, right? Step one, I think we need to have like proper governance mechanism, right? Before we write any code, we need to make sure that there's a designated AI risk owner, right?
Love this. Yeah, gotta have governance.
Yeah, in industries such as healthcare, medtech, and finance, right? That's usually the chief risk officer. But what I'm saying, we need to have like a juxtaposition of a cross-functional AI council, which comprises of the compliance team, the customer experience, the engineering, the customer advocate, right? All of these guys needs to come together and document the risk tolerance, like which customer outcomes are actually unacceptable, right? That would actually govern the kind of system that we will be building, because we need to understand, as I mentioned, um, empathy is not something that is sprinkled on the prompt level, right? It needs to be in the objective function, right? So that's something that somebody needs to always make sure that these qualities are engineered into the system. And when I talk about empathy, it's not about sounding kind. It's about making sure that the system is more prudent, that it escalates when there's like a distress voice on the other end of the bot, or any messaging system in this scenario, right? We need to map out the stakes. Just pull a sample of like 100 customers, right? But and their interactions from last 90 days. Classify each of them into like 3 tiers. Like the first being the low stakes, which is like the reversible harm, simple FAQ stuff, right? Tier two is probably like the medium stakes, where if there's any sort of like planned changes to product that the customer might have purchased, right? Finally, there's like the higher stakes, where it's irreversible, or any emotionally consequential decisions are going to be made. Different tiers get different levels of treatment, and I feel AI is probably capable enough these days to handle the first tier. It is capable enough to be like a co-pilot for the second tier, but for the third tier, human needs to own it. Period. That's it. No discussion, right? If you want to make sure that your system is empathetic in nature, um, instead of creating the things that your AI systems can do, first take a step back and prepare what your systems will never do. So I always say, make a never to do list, right? This can be like your one-page document that says whatever what your AI will not do or will never do. Things like never confirm a policy lapse or a cancellation, never recommend a specific financial product, probably never respond to a language indicating distrust, right? This becomes your governance surface, right? Every audit comes back to this document. So, because as we move on to a much more automated world, where everybody's just trying to achieve artificial general intelligence, I feel LLMs are going to play one of the most pivotal part of that ecosystem, not if not the central part, right? We need to make sure that the kind of dystopian voices that we hear about, AI taking over everything, we need to like make sure that it's just a co-pilot. It's here to make us productive, right? So that's where building empathetic systems are going to help us a lot. We as I mentioned, we need to measure the instrument, the truth metrics, right? We need to, I think I covered this earlier, but just to repeat, we need to throw out conversation quality, response
Yeah.
speed. That's just, customer satisfaction surveys. Oh my God, which is done immediately after the interaction. That's just not the right metrics. And everybody trying to just automate everything. We need to not measure that, especially for small and medium sized enterprises as they build the roadmap for the next 1 or 2 quarters, right? It needs to be on the planning services when they are starting their whole journey, and I guess finally pilot the hybrid system first and then probably expand. I see with the augment of vibe coding tools, and a lot of like customizable AI tools, honestly, things like Claude Copilot and stuff like that. Everybody's just going directly with the production service. Don't do that. I think launch the AI as a second pair of eyes for human agents first, and then probably, as I mentioned, categorize those things in the low risk tiers, the medium risk tiers, and the higher risk tiers. And make sure that where AI is performing really well on par with humans, then slightly make the pivot for smaller samples and then go for the complete ones. So I think, long story short, yes, I think there are a lot of things that we can look at when we are trying to make our systems more empathetic. It's just people need to read more. I think the attention span is getting really less.
One of the challenges in building and deploying these empathetic AI models is that there is the common criticism that it just still doesn't know what it's like to be alive and live in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are these world models that experiment of trying to make it,
Yeah.
experience the world in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
But do you believe that empathetic AI agents still do have certain blind spots that can really inhibit empathetic action? That, even if it's a well-built model, empathetically speaking, it still has blind spots?
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a really nice question. Spoke about this in intensively in my talk at Louisville. I'd certainly push back on the framing of that question a little gently. Um, the blind spots that I worry about have got nothing to do with AI not experiencing life. They have to do with how systems are actually designed. Yeah, and that distinction matters because one of those framings have the solutions and one of them doesn't. But I mean, look, if the problem is AI can't truly feel things, then we're just stuck, right? We're not moving forward, right? We can have a very philosophical seminar about it, and trust me, none of us are going to give the model a very hunky-dory childhood. But that's actually not the actual problem as well. The actual problem that we are talking about, in terms of empathy and empathy within these AI systems, are that these blind spots that you are talking about, um, right, are sometimes engineered in, often without anyone noticing, right? And I think I'd probably flag a couple of them. Um, the first one, which is probably very important, is the context blindness. Large language models are remarkably good at local coherence. You give them like a good sentence, they produce a fluent, appropriate sounding response. But I guess they're much worse at integrating the information beyond the immediate message. So so let's say when a customer says, I'm just trying to figure out which option hurts less for me, a human probably might pick up on that phrase. But the AI system would actually just optimize the response to the question that was just asked. And it will not try to read the underneath context behind that question, because it's just we have to understand it's just trying to predict the next most uh, plausible token, right? It's just predicting the next token, and by token I mean just numbers, because machines can't read. They we feed them numbers. So that's the thing, right? Uh, I think secondly, I would say restraint blindness. That's sort of counterintuitive for people like us, especially because we are the ones who are actually trying to build these systems. Because most generative models are trained to producing some outputs. They're not rewarded for saying I shouldn't answer this, so let me get a human for you. They're not trained to do that. So I guess the system sometimes biases towards responding even when the right answer is silence. And that's like a structural problem with how models were actually trained on the first go, right? And again, that doesn't really go away by just fine tuning the prompt. Finally, I would say, user adjusted problem. I think I'm just repeating that thing again and again. And this is probably one of the most dangerous things, because it's invisible in nature, is what I feel, based on a lot of research studies that I've gone through, because of the kind of work that I do, right? Users tend to sometimes lower their standards when they know that they are talking to a bot, right? So the bot appears to pass most of the guardrails that we have actually put in place, because let's be honest, humans have actually experienced much worse things in life, right? And again, there's a very interesting study about this as well, which I quoted in my talk at Louisville too. There's a very interesting study posted by the NIH, UPenn, and NYU, where they're saying that chatbots actually score significantly higher um, than humans in conversation quality, but they
Oh, wow.
actually score really less in terms of empathy in every empathy dimension. So, you know, what that tells you is that the users aren't really measuring the empathy, but they're just trying to sort of rate the mechanical conversation, that we usually have with any chatbot system, or any messaging system. Nowadays we have conversation systems as well, so you might as well just include them too. They're just trying to measure whether a bot was acceptable or not, right? And I feel, and I've worked with companies like Silicon Valley Bank, where PII data is extremely important. So I
Yeah.
feel, uh, this also becomes a safety concern, right? And what users tend to tolerate, systems tends to normalize. So that's probably a few of the things that I would say are the blind spots that at least I'm worried about. Um, there's a good news as well. These are all, I say, engineering problems. These are not these, and for most of the engineering problems, I guess there are engineering solutions as well. Um, I feel you can instrument for context awareness. You can reward restraint, right? You can build proper escalation mechanism, especially around the vulnerability indicators such as PII data. And there are like plenty of examples. Big corporations have actually incorporated all of these things into their systems that they have deployed, right? So I guess I can talk about this topic for hours and hours, but I'll just cut short everything and I'll say that the short answer is yes. AI does have blind spots, but they're not because they cannot feel and experience the world around us. They're because of the choices that we've actually made when we're trying to build them, and different choices have like different blind spots. So yeah.
What would you say? You mentioned, like, again, leaders, you have to design empathy within your systems before you build
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So the what if you're a leader and you're looking around at your C-suite team and
Yeah.
you might be the only empathetic one? What
Yeah.
how are have you approached or do you see this, I guess, with companies and large enterprises where, maybe some of the leaders do care about the empathy um, design framework and care about it, and then you have maybe other leaders that feel like efficiency or other principles should be at the forefront of the AI roadmap and plan. So how do you approach those conversations with leaders when people aren't on the same page and they aren't all together focused on, designing from an empathy and human centric point?
I think thankfully that thing is changing these days. At least in the kind of interactions that I have had with my
Okay.
team, that thing is changing. Nobody wants to completely rely on AI systems making any sort of irreversible decisions. So I think that thing, and again, my answer over here would be sort of like a biased answer again, because I've had the experience of working with a lot of regulated industries. I've worked in insurance,
Yeah, insurance is highly regulated.
extremely regulated, right? And there's a very, again, famous example about this. There's an insurtech company, right? They have come out with a claims chat, and trust me, claims is like the bread and butter for an insurance company. We cannot afford to make any wrong decisions through claims, right? If we do that,
Be out of business.
we're going to be in a very bad situation, right? But this insurtech company in 2023 set a world record for settling an insurance claim in just under 2 minutes, right? And that was a pet claim, and according to them, more than 50% are actually handled instantly, right? So I think AI systems can perform at a level in cases, where humans can actually only dream of, right? But here's the important thing, right? The reason these kind of systems actually are successful is because the higher management and the developers, and when I'm saying the developers or the engineering team, I'm talking about the staff engineers, right? The reason these things work isn't just because of the speed. Um, it is because there are certain carve outs. This insurtech company designed this chatbot system in a way that it never touched certain types of claims. Things like major health claims, fatality claims, anything wherever there's like a grieving family on the other end. Those got those get instantly routed to humans. Full stop. Right. And
Yeah,
heard that
smart.
their CEO has been pretty vocal about this in many interviews, right? That speed isn't always the right metric. So I think things like these are like a good sign that, and don't get me wrong, right? I'm not a technology conservatist, right? I love technology. I'm a technology enthusiast. But um, things like these where big companies are making sure that speed, and accuracy and automation are not the right things to measure the success of an AI system is probably the right way, and the right direction that everybody's going. And it's actually an architecture decision. We need to engineer the system in such a way that, as I mentioned, classify each of them into 3 or 4 tiers, whatever, however you want to classify them, and then just make the pivot slowly. Make sure that the right things are going to the human teams and the right things are going to the bots. There's another example, a large bank in US, really large bank. I'm pretty sure you guys must also be banking with them, right? Three, according to them, again, if my facts correct me, 3 billion interactions since 2018, right? We didn't even have proper Gen AI in 2000, like
My
proper Gen,
God.
right? In 2018, where transformers were actually sort of like taking over everything, right?
Yeah.
According to them, 98% of users find the answers that they need in just under like 48 seconds. And again, here's the part that most people don't miss, don't really focus on. This bank made a deliberate decision not to put generative AI in front of the customers. They probably might be using it within their own teams to probably optimize their efficiency, but they made sure that the customer facing technology that they have is still deterministic NLP, which is like natural language processing. Why? Because I think they want to make sure, or probably they want to be like 100% comfortable with every answer that the system gives. Again, this was like a staggering figure, which I'm just trying to quote. They've made like 75,000 updates since the launch. So since 2018, they've made like 75,000 updates to the system.
Oh my gosh.
Again, not technology conservatism, right? That's just trying to be risk aware and being prudent, making sure that we're giving the right information. And this is coming from a huge bank, right? So it's not that a lot of people are not on the same page. It's just that, and this is the part where I feel a little scared when it comes to small or somewhat medium enterprises, that they just want to roll out stuff. That's 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 probably one of the pros and cons situation of technology democratization that we are living in right now. It feels so great that we have this remarkably powerful technology in the hands of everybody. It's not just in the hands of few people. But then we also need to make sure that there are proper guidelines to it. Not everybody is a technology. So, and trust me, there are like a USAI action plan that was recently signed as well. There's a different EU regulation plan. Even New York and California have their own uh, AI statutory plan. So things like these needs to like move forward in a way that it's more propagated and more vocal. But there should be like a proper plan before people actually start developing these
And most business owners, well, not most, but a good amount, are in a situation where they just don't have the resources that affords them the luxury of being able to build an AI system from the ground
things.
up. And so they don't really have the option to kind of make sure that empathy is at the rock bottom foundation of
Yeah,
the system.
yeah.
And so what they're doing is they're going to subscription models to where they have some degree of customization. They might even be able to fine tune it a little bit. What
Hmm.
practical tips would you have for these business owners to get these models in these situations through whether it's customization and like Claude Cowork or fine tuning like a custom GPT to kind of get more empathetic action out of these models?
Yeah. Again, yeah, that's a very good question. I think I briefly covered this in one of my previous answers. I'll probably start off this question with one of my own personal engineering and research project that I was able to implement, right? Um, the idea was actually based on policy policies being lapsed in a life insurance scenario. We need to understand policy lapses is actually not a natural neutral event, right? Um, it's actually a scenario where the customer on the other end is not telling us to cancel our policies. It's actually the customer is actually trying to tell us that hey, something terribly has gone in my life right now. Right? So what I based on the research that I have studied, what I tried to architect was was a predictive risk model that actually runs before the large language model engages. It pulls the predicted lapse risks and approved intervention guidelines from scraped from the internet. And all of these compliance guidelines are actually available openly on the internet on the GOP website. Once all of those things get pulled in, that is the context that gets fed into the LLM systems before it even reasons or responds. So at that point, the LLM is not trying to act autonomously; it's just trying to behave more informationally. And when the risk is high, it becomes more cautious and explanatory and pushing towards like a more human conversation, right? That's the kind of empathy that at least I envision. And there are several things. One of the main things that I mentioned earlier was, prepare your never to do list, right? This is again like a one pager, and we have a lot of tools where we can define the skills of an agent uh, through this documentation, right? Whatever agents that we are trying to deploy, we can actually have all of these never to do list in the skills uh, of the agent, right? Things like, again, never I I would never want my accounts to get freezed. Apparently, that might be a good idea for a system to be empathetic, but freezing an account for a customer who lives on a paycheck to paycheck and then freezing it on a Friday afternoon, that's not an empathetic reaction. You need to escalate when things like that happen. When you see that things are being suspicious, that's the cue where you want the human intervention, right? Prepare your never to do list in this scenario, right? The next I would say is like a technical one. Most teams build the chatbot first and then bolt on the safety. I think invert that. That's really important. Build a risk model that runs before the large language model engages, right? Use things like RAGs that decreases the hallucination rates to pull the approved guidance uh, that can be fed into the model's context. The things that I just mentioned in my personal project, right? Um, and honestly, all of these things are 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 true for any customizable AI tool, right? The
Exactly.
principles all apply the same. When you're writing the system prompts, structure them around what the assistant is for, what it specifically must not do. The things that I was just mentioning. Prepare your skills.md through Claude. All of these are available. Whoever is listening to this and trying to build like an agent, they know what I'm talking about. um, that's your never to do list. Make sure you explicitly write what your agent must not do, right? What triggers a human handoff and what sources it should retrieve from rather than just generate freely. Don't let the model invent the guidance for you. Make the retrieve compliance approved language and then deliver it. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of things like this, and if you want it, there's any, I'm like happy to share all of the resources that I have read through. Happy to share if anybody wants to know more about this. There are a lot of tips.
Well,
Yeah,
when I was going to say, Ayush, thank you so much for
right.
this thoughtful and very empathetic conversation. How we're going to drop a lot of in the show notes some of the research that you did mention, but how if someone wants to know more and get in touch with you, how would you suggest they find you?
Well, I'm always active on LinkedIn. So if
Link.
there's if there's anything that you would want or would want to have like a conversation about things, I'm always available on LinkedIn to anybody and everybody. So that's something anybody can.
Perfect. Well, we will drop that, his LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Thank you so much, Ayush, for this. I learned a lot, so I know our audience did too.
I'm glad. Yeah, no, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is probably the first time I'm doing this, and glad to be doing this with you guys. You guys have been patient enough because I tend to ramble on a lot sometimes, but it's
No,
been
I learned a lot.
it, it's been great. Thank you so much.